Welcome back to the Woman of Worth podcast. I'm your host, Tanisha Bergs. I don't know about you, but I have been enjoying the Embracing Your Joseph series. It is really speaking to me and reaching me differently than it did. Like I said, I taught this class before. It was a class. And I taught it from a different perspective because I think I was a little bit immature when I first taught the class. And now that I'm a little bit more mature in the spirit, it's really hitting me different, and it's really making me look at suffering in a different way, and it's really making me appreciate when God takes me through certain stuff because I know that it's building me and it's building character, and it's bringing me closer to him, closer to purpose that he has called me to. And it seems weird to say, like, oh God, I'm so thankful for my suffering. I'm so thankful for the things that I'm losing. I'm so thankful for having to go through certain things. But it really shows that how God has his hand on your life when you allow him to take you through certain things. And I really can't explain it. It just sounds odd, but I'm really understanding that the purpose of suffering is not so that you can be hurt or that God wants to hurt you. It's because, like when you take a orange and you squeeze the orange, you're trying to get that juice out of the orange. And sometimes that's what God is doing with us. We're the orange and he's squeezing us. And sometimes it feels like a crushing, but he's really trying to get that juice, that oil out of us. He's trying to get the best things that he has placed in us out of us. So if you're in a season where you're going through a crushing, just enjoy the crush. Like crush soda. I love an orange crush soda. Enjoy the crush and be patient and remember that God is with you. Even in the crushing, his favor is still on you and he's building you. So, in this episode, last episode, we talked about how Joseph suffered at the hands of his leaders because he was lied on. He was placed into prison because of the lie, but he still found favor in prison. He still found favor when he was sold. He just found favor everywhere that he went because he never forgot who he served and he never forgot that God's hand was on him. So this week we talk about how his dream came to pass. Remember the dream that he said to his brothers, and his brothers hated him because they realized that the dream meant that they were going to bow to him. And even when he told his father about the dream, Jacob was a little irritated by the fact that Joseph was saying the whole family was going to bow to him. But Jacob did not hate him. He kept that in his heart. He remembered that Joseph had that dream because Jacob knew God and he knew that that dream meant something. So, where we left off last week, we know that Joseph was put second in command because he was able to interpret Pharaoh's dream when no one else could. So, Joseph now becomes second in command. For 7 years, he stored up the good harvest. He stored up enough so that everyone would be able to eat. And he stored up enough in that 7 years because he knew that 7 years of famine was coming. Well, Joseph, some of the crew had stored up so much stuff that it was just overflowing to the point where other parts of the country, when they ran out, they would come to Joseph to purchase grain and different things like that so that they can eat. So let's jump back a little bit. When Joseph was sold into slavery, he was 17 years old. He was 30 years old when he became second in command. This was 13 years that Joseph was suffering, was in slavery, and was in prison. Between that time, I don't know how many years he spent in prison. That's something that I'm probably going to look up because that question just came to me. I don't know how many years he spent in the house, but I know that within that 13 years, he went from the face to the prison, and then from prison to being second in command. Now, most people will say stuff like Joseph went from the pit to the palace. No, he didn't. Joseph went from the pit to slavery to being in charge of everything in the house to the prison. And then he went from prison to being second in command. It took him 13 years. Joseph did not overnight go from a pit to a palace. If you consider living in a palace but being someone's slave heavenly, then that's you. Then yes, you can say that he went from the pit to the palace. But I say that he did not go from the pit to the palace overnight, because he was a slave when he went to that palace, and he was thrown into the slavery prison. Okay? So Joseph went from the pit to slavery to prison, and then he was in the palace as second in command. Not an overnight thing. 13 years, which lets you know that sometimes God will do things immediately, and then sometimes things take time. Think about when you are cooking a roast in a crock pot. That roast is not going to be done in 5 minutes. That thing has to slow cook. And when it slow cooks, you get all of the seasonings. You can taste it. You've made this wonderful gravy. The vegetables are all tender. The meat is tender. It's falling off the bones. I do boneless. So it's like if you pick up the meat, it's like, oh, it's like falling off. it because it's slow cooked. Now, you personally, I don't use a crock pot. I slow cook mine in the oven, and I slow cook that thing on a low heat for about 4 hours. And when I tell you that's the best roast, now I'm making myself hungry. Now I want to roast. All right. So, anyways, some things God says I can do like this, like with the woman with the issue of blood. I'm gonna touch you and immediately you're gonna be healed. And then some things, honey, I gotta put you in the pressure cooker. You gotta cook slow. A pressure cooker, I think, makes things cook a little bit faster, but it's some pressure in that cook. You gotta sit in that heat. Some things take time, 13 years, and then some things can be done immediately. It all depends on what God is trying to do and what He's trying to pull out of you. So at this time, Joseph is 30 years old. This famine is finally here. His brothers, they're back in their hometown. Now, again, they think that they don't know what has become of their brother. They haven't forgotten about Joseph, and you'll find that they haven't forgotten about Joseph because, okay, we're going to get there. But they haven't forgotten about Joseph. Israel, Jacob's name is now changed to Israel. Jacob is Joseph's father. His name has been changed to Israel. Israel thinks his son is dead. These boys, they're running out of food. Their father is getting old. Israel's old. He's dying. And they say, well, we heard that wherever the land was that Joseph was, we heard that they have food, so we can travel there. It's maybe like a 2 to 3 day travel. They said we can travel there and we can get some food and we can bring it back. So Jacob says, okay, Jacob again, his name is Israel. So from now on, from here on, I will refer to him as Israel. Israel says, okay. He sends the brother, but he keeps Joseph's younger brother, Benjamin, who is also Rachel's youngest son. I believe Rachel passed away when she was giving birth to Benjamin. So he kept Benjamin close to him because he was the last of his beloved wife's son. And again, he's thinking Joseph is dead. So the brothers, they all travel to where Joseph is so they can get food. Joseph immediately, when his brothers come, he immediately recognizes his brothers. They don't recognize him. They don't know what happened to him. So then Joseph, they begin to bow to Joseph because he's second in command. They think that he's this Egyptian ruler, and they begin to bow to him. It suddenly clicks into Joseph's head that this is the dream that he had. And his brothers are actually bowing just like he said. Oh my God. Hold on, y'all. All right. So he's remembering, okay, this dream, it's coming to pass. Again, his brothers don't recognize him. So then he starts dealing with them in a mean way. And then the brothers are wondering, like, why is he giving us such a hard time? Like, we have money, we bringing him everything, we brought him gifts. Why are they treating us like this? And one of the brothers, this is how I say that they did not forget about Joseph and all this time, and that guilt was probably riding them for all 13 years. One of the brothers says, "This is because of what we did to Joseph." Joseph hears this and he starts crying. And I think what happened, I think this was after he sent them back home the first time, because he sent them home and asked them to bring back Benjamin, because he wanted to make sure that his baby brother was actually still alive and that they weren't lying to him when they said that they had another brother that stayed with the father. He thought that they had actually done something to Benjamin as well. So he wanted them to bring Benjamin back so that he could actually see that his brother was alive. Well, the brothers are like, well, we can't take Benjamin because our father is old. He's ill. And if we take Benjamin, it's surely going to kill him because he already lost one of his sons. So if we bring him back, that's going to kill our dad. And so Joseph, at this point, he's like, I want to see your brother, come back with your brother. And one of the brothers ends up staying as a prisoner until they came back, because Joseph just did not believe that they were going to come back. He really thought they were lying. So they come back, and I believe that is when one of the brothers finally says, this is happening to us because of what we did to our brother Joseph. And Joseph starts to cry. And then that's when he turns around and he reveals himself. Now, I might be out of order with this. That's why I say, read Genesis chapter 37 through 50. It's all in there. And Joseph begins to cry. He reveals himself to his brothers. They have dinner together, and then they go back, they get the father, and then the father stays there in the land with Joseph. Um, I just think God is amazing. And one of the things that Joseph said to his brothers, because they apologized to him for what they had put him through. They had no idea what Joseph had went through. And maybe he told them how he came to be second in command without having to skip what he had to go through to become second in command. So the brothers apologized, and Joseph's words were, you meant it for my evil, but God used it for my good. So in other words, had you not done these things, had you not done this, had you not sold me into slavery, when this famine came, there would have been no place for you to come and get food. So at this point, it's not about you bowing to me. Yes, God was showing me you bowing to me, but at the same time, I believe Joseph realized at such a young age, at a 17-year-old age, when he was telling his brothers this thing, he was bragging it, he really missed the big picture, that God was showing him what was to come and how this famine was going to come across the land, and God was going to use him and his brothers will bow to him. Now, God didn't reveal to Joseph in that dream that his brothers weren't going to know who he was, because surely if his brothers knew who he was, they probably wouldn't have bowed to him. They probably would be like, Joseph, oh my God, you're alive, brother. We've been feeling so guilty for what that. Please forgive us. We need food. Dad is at home. He's hungry. Okay? But it's funny how God will reveal stuff in a dream and will take bits and parts of the revelation to mean one thing when it really means something. The really basic part of that dream was not about Joseph's brothers bowing to him. The main point of that dream was that God was going to use Joseph in a time of famine to be able to save his family, and his family would honor him, not bow to him. So don't ever get the bowing confused with the honor. The bowing is not the most important thing. We so stuck on that our enemies becoming our footstool. I need some backs to step on. No. What is it in this revelation that God is showing you that he's going to use you to do, that's going to make people not just honor you per se, but honor the God in you and honor the gift and the call of God on your life? And think about it, while you're trying so hard to rush for all this honor and for all this praise and for all of this recognition, look at what Joseph had to go through. That was 13 years of suffering. 13 years of being separated from his family, 13 years of being isolated from his family. He had no idea who he was. He was in a land by himself. He knew absolutely no one. Started out as a slave, ended up in prison, and became second in command. Father thinks he's dead, so no one's looking for him. No one's sending for him. 13 years by himself. The only person he had, and I shouldn't say the only person, but the only thing he could count on, the only thing that was familiar to him was the presence of God in his life. But it was 13 years of him and God. 13 years of suffering. That was 13 years he spent innocently as a slave in a prison, accused, lied on, mistreated. 13 years because of a dream. And if you read any version of the Bible, you'll find that not one of these versions say that in any of that time that Joseph complained about his suffering. And it reminds me of Jesus. Joseph and Jesus have a lot of commonalities. Sitting there, not saying the mumbling word, not complaining. Jesus carrying the cross, not saying the mumbling word, not complaining, being pierced on the side, lied on, talked about, mistreated, spit on, throwing the crowns on his head. Not saying a mumbling word, not defending himself, but just suffering, taking it on and suffering. Can we honestly say, we want to be, oh God, I want to be like you. Jesus, I want to be like you. I want to love like you. I want to talk like you. I want to walk like you. But do we realize what we have to go through, walk and talk and be like him? Do we realize that we may have to get lied on? Because we can't even stand when somebody put up a Facebook status about us. We can't even stand when somebody's lying on us. We can't stand. We always got to open our mouth and we always got to defend ourselves. When someone says something out of line to us, we just got to defend ourselves. That's part of the suffering. That's part of being like him. Shutting up. Learning not to respond to everything, but waiting for God to give us the appropriate response. I just had this conversation with my son. He's 21 and he wants to rebuttal everything that I tell him. And then he comes back and apologizes. And I said, listen, sometimes you just need to be quiet and you just need to think before you speak. If you know that what you're going to say is about to offend me, think about a different way to say it. Or don't say it at all. Because I consider my words before I speak to you because you're my child, but you're also grown. So sometimes in our suffering, sometimes we have to learn how to be quiet and not say anything and just take it on. And like I said before, the best defense sometimes is no defense. The best answer sometimes is no answer. You can say more in your silence than you can in your words. Everything that God has placed in you, every dream that he's given you, it's going to come to pass. But you got to learn how to be quiet and be okay with where you are, realizing that where you are is not your final destination. Realize that God has so much more in store for you, so many other things that he's going to bring to your life, so many other things that he's going to do for you. But where you are right now, just stay there until he says move. Don't try to rush the process of God because you're going to miss something and then you're going to have to go back. Don't take 12 steps forward just to take 10 back. Keep moving forward. Keep trusting in God. Listen to him. Listen for his word. Now, Joseph, I think when he saw his brothers, yeah, he was a little bit petty. I do believe so. Because he remembered what they did to him, rightfully so. But just remember, every good thing that God has promised you, it doesn't matter if you told somebody and they're throwing darts to try to make you stop. Remember, everything that they're placing in front, every attack that's happening, it's all a part of the process. And it's all for the dream to come to pass. We got one more episode in this Embracing Joseph series. And then after that, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, it is the season finale. And I'll be back with you in July. But remember that everything that God has promised you, it doesn't matter what hurdles you have to jump over, what suffering you may have to go through. It's all a part of the process, and it's all going to come to pass.